Southwest Fire Academy was established in 2015 as a response to the recognized need for quality, safe, and affordable fire and rescue training in Ontario. This is not your average fire college. SFA has high standards for their students, and it is their mission to teach and produce qualified, ambitious firefighters who are prepared to work hard to serve their communities. This is not a diploma mill. This is where you can learn strategic, aggressive firefighting from passionate, intelligent instructors who never forget why they were made to do this job. SFA is an accredited private career college that is regulated by the Ministry of Training, colleges, and universities, with a memorandum of understanding with the Office of the Fire Marshal. This means that SFA is an approved training provider with the OFM, and the programs are recognized in Ontario. Check out their pre-service and expanding selection of course offerings at southwestfireacademy.ca. Hello everyone. Welcome to episode 117 of Multiple Calls. I'm Scott Hewlett. Great instructors appreciate feedback, whether it affirms what they are conveying well or informs them of where they can improve. They also welcome engagement, input of alternative techniques, approaches, and perspectives. It's not hyperbole to say that sharing information is an extension and continuation of the learning process. Jordan Peterson has said that every time he lectures, he's working at a problem that he is trying to solve for himself, that he is thinking through complex ideas in real time, using the audience as a sounding board to refine his understanding. He sees the privilege of public speaking not as a delivery of finalized conclusions, but as a dynamic process of exploration. Any approachable and inclusive instructor that has been doing it for long enough can recall learning things from participants, even on subjects they have been focusing on for years, and they are excited to mine that gold from every opportunity, and they will integrate it and continue to pay it forward. This is what both instructor and participants need to be aware of as the foundation for any training interaction. It's a synergistic relationship. Regardless of how phenomenal the instructor is, if who they are sharing information with are not engaged, nothing good will result, and vice versa. If you have an amazing training experience with an instructor, let them know. If you have an amazing training experience as the instructor, let the person or group know. Gaining skills and knowledge from training is good, but getting better together with shared gratitude and appreciation, that's what makes it special. Here's my second chat with Aaron Fields. I think I'd like to talk to you about pride with you as a point of reflection. Just on the facets of your life, like sort of looking outward and then start outward, work inward. So I'd thought about, over the course of your connection with the profession, what do you feel you're proud of the fire service for as a starting point?
Am I proud of the fire service? I think I'm proud that the industry is at least focused on ethics. What I've come to realize at this point is that what's kept me interested is the fact that I've never really had to compromise my ethics as a human. And I've had to do stuff that I didn't like, et cetera, but at the end of the day, I think that the fire service has a mission of being humane. And I think that that's a pretty cool thing. It's hard because to say I'm proud of something or the other, to say proud would imply some degree of ownership. And I think that I'm immensely impressed with what some of our members are able to do and do in the face of non-doers. That's pretty impressive how people just continue to do the right thing. At least largely. But I don't know that you can be prideful of something that you didn't have a hand in. And most of the industry I didn't have a hand in. So I think you can have some pride for things you've accomplished or things that you've helped other people accomplish, but that's a delicate line between being pleased with work ethic and being arrogant.
Yeah, I know that you're very much about the semantics of things, and I knew this word would be no exception. And that's kind of why I wanted to hone in on it, about your perspective on pride and just things you're happy to see, I guess.
I'm happy to see a new generation coming in that is a Y generation. I'm a Y guy and I'm 54, and I've always been a Y guy. And I think I'm happy with some of the development of actual cultivation of growing people in the industry. I think we have to be very careful about referring to people as children or implying that new firefighters are not adult. They're adults. They've done other things. They're just new firefighters. So that's very different. I think a lot of times when people talk about their recruit classes or something like that, there's almost a paternal tone. And that has put me off from the beginning. I don't need parents. I have them. I'm an adult. We often kind of associate that mentorship to almost a romantic endeavor where they're like, well, this person's very knowledgeable and everything they say is gold, when in fact, they're not. They might be technically very good, but that doesn't mean they're a role model. They might be a technical mentor, but not a role model. And frankly, I don't have any role models in the industry. I have mentors, some guy that's my peer. I mean, like, there's a couple of chiefs in Seattle that act like I'm a child. I'm like, I'm as old as you are, for fuck's sake. Like, I've done more in many realms than you have. I just didn't take trivia tests as well as you did. And there's things that they've done that I haven't done. And I don't understand why we have to have this hierarchy of adulthood and kind of as a secondary meaning to rank, when, I got guys that have done amazing things that are much younger than me and are in the chain of command, but they're not children. So there's almost, for me, it's a tough one because there's almost a patronizing tone. I'm incredibly enthusiastic for what some of the people in the Nozzle Forward group have used, the Nozzle Forward methodology, the kind of the educational architecture, to build some programs in their specialties kind of under the Nozzle Forward umbrella. But am I proud of them? No. I respect their effort. I think what they have to offer is fantastic. But to say pride would imply that I have some ownership in that. I don't. They did the work on learning the methodology and their specialty. Pride's a difficult one, Scott. That's a hard one, because I think that there's a semantic of ownership and or a paternal kind of, I'm proud of my children. I'm proud of the work that I've done to be married for as long as I have. But I think the thing that you're prideful of isn't the outcome, it's the process. I'm happy that I've continued to work hard. That's where you get your value, I think, and for all things. It's labor, whether we want to admit it or not. Sometimes people get pretty big and like, hey, what's the meaning of life? The meaning of life is to work. That's the meaning of life. It's that simple. And it doesn't mean employment. It means work. And you work at anything that you like. This work-life balance thing, I don't even know what that fucking means. Like work-life, like when I'm off duty, I'm working on stuff. When I'm employed, I'm working on stuff. I'm always working on stuff. Otherwise, there'd be no success ever. Like, that's your point. You work at your relationships. You work at, I'll change that angle. You work at all of these things that we value comes from our labor to get there. So, yeah, I don't know about pride, though. I mean, that's a long, rambling answer to kind of several other topics, but they all kind of connect.
You mentioned the cadre there. What a better word than to choose in reflecting on them and how you've seen them grow over the years and instruct and share information over the years. Like, what do you admire most about the cadre looking back?
I admire what we've done together, that it's not a one-man show and that they've contributed, and we are at a point now where, not figuratively, literally, we can finish each other's sentences. It's kind of personal, but I've moved through life fairly alienated, meaning because I don't have the nostalgia gene, I don't remember the good times. I'm always thinking about the next. And that makes it hard to have, I don't have any friends from high school. I have only a few friends left from the 20 years plus that I ran a grappling gym. I still grapple, but I don't, the gym's not the center of that group anymore. I don't do that. And so with that, without question, my longest standing relationship is with my wife. And it makes it a little awkward socially, but I don't get any enjoyment out of nostalgia. And I think a lot of times when you have friends that you've hung out with all these years, and when you get together, you talk about the things you used to do. I don't have any of that anywhere. I think the thing that I admire the most is the friendships that have come out of this work relationship with the Cadre. I mean, they are without question my best friends, but I'm also not foolish to think enough to think that when we're all done, that all of us will be in touch. Personally, for me, that's never been a real thing. So I think I admire where we're at, that we're less of a cadre and more of a think tank.
Do you think that's one of the troubles with the fire service, that it's too nostalgic? Is it a problem in the service that there's nostalgia as part of it?
No, not necessarily. As long as it's balanced. I think the problem in the fire service is it's a pretty well-trodden material, but there's not enough of a history, a collection of material, and not enough of knowing where we came from to know why we're doing what we're doing. And I think that knowing a bit of history is a good thing, but history that gets in the way of the mission is a detrimental thing. We have to be better scholars and better tradespeople of our industry. One of the things I think that's really interesting on this point is semantics, right? In Canada, as you know, they're referred to as fire halls and not firehouses. And I think that's a good thing. I think too many people come in and think they own the place and that the place exists for them and that they put their feet up. And I like the fact, when asked, or way back 10 years ago, why you all did that, the answer was because it's not a home, it's a place of employment. The same as a military barrack isn't a home, it's a barrack. And I think that that's a good thing because it keeps it a little more distinct. Purposeful in where you're at and what the mission is.
What do you hope people think and feel when they reflect on their time with you in the Cadre?
I hope that they had a good time. I hope that they felt like they weren't patronized, that they were included in the process, and that the Cadre recognized that the Cadre's existence is for them when they're going through it. And I hope that they remember that there is a community of people that are doing this skill set and doing it at a fairly high level with very little actual deviation if you're not mimicking stuff. So that's what I hope they remember. I hope they remember the what, why, when, and how, and that it gets simpler, not more complicated.
We talked recently about your job change and then your health change because of that. I think it'd be really important for people to hear that coming from you about your epiphanies on what was affecting you and how you feel now, and maybe help them track their career in a different way.
It's interesting because in the meantime, I found out that like the clinic that works for my old place, Seattle, doesn't even test blood sugar on firefighters because it's always high. And it's always high because of the endocrine system, right? And so I felt great. There are no issues. I'm still kicking around fantastic. No long-term pain, nothing like that. Completely asymptomatic. And it looks like sometime early this year, I hit saturation and my blood sugar crept up, and not crazy high, but higher than somebody that doesn't drink, hasn't had soda in 25 years, doesn't eat fast food, doesn't drink. I drink zero alcohol. I exercise. I eat where I eat. All of these things. The doctor is a new physician. My old physician retired, and she had done a physical and was like, yeah, your vitals are fantastic, blah, blah, blah. You know, you're looking great, except for your cortisol level's high and your blood sugar's a little high. I was like, well, shit, I guess I'll do whatever it takes. So I make very little alteration, except in July 4th was my last day with Seattle. And I was on the books until August 1st, and I started a new job on August 1st. And that job is a chief of operations and training, and in a smaller place. And so I started sleeping in my own bed every night. One of the things the physician asked me was, she said, "Hey, how often are you sleeping through?" And I'm like, yeah, never. And she's like, "When was the last time you had a dream you could remember?" And I'm like, yeah, probably 15 years. And she's kind of nodding, and she's like, "At home, do you nap?" And I'm like, yes. She's like, "Do you sleep through when you're at night?" And I'm like, no, I don't. And she's like, "Yeah, these are all very common symptoms." I've been doing quite a bit of research. Some of that research tracks back to Pittsburgh and Seattle. A Harvard doctor did a study, I don't know, 20 years ago or so. And there's been more studies done since, and yada, yada, yada. So I go back in on August 24th. So it's been, basically a month and 20 days. So 50 days or so. And she starts laughing, and she's like, "What's changed?" And I made a joke about, I'm 54 years old and I can kick, stretch, and kick. And she started laughing, and she's like, "How is that sleep?" I said, "It took me 4 weeks, and then I could sleep through. I'm sleeping through every night. I had dreams that I could remember." She's like, "Change your diet?" I'm like, "No, not really, other than I'm eating dinner at a little earlier time because I'm not in the fire station, and I'm sleeping in my own bed every night." She's like, "That's really the only change, right?" And I'm like, "Yep." And she's like, "Well, your numbers are crashing back to normal range, and that there's no sign of any permanent, and you have no symptom of high blood sugar, no organ. Your organs are great. All your functions are fine. I think it probably took off in February or March. Luckily, we caught it. It's coming back down." She's like, "But what you should know is you went from 226 to 205 in 50 days. I lost 20 pounds, and just sleeping on my own bed. My exercise routine is the same. My diet is basically the same, just sleeping." And she's like, "Right, because cortisol triggers your body to release sugar because it's a fight or flight. You need the sugar to run from the lion." And she says the data suggests 20 to 25 years, your endocrine system is like, "Oh, fuck it." And I'm done paying attention to it, because at 24-hour shifts, you're under cortisol drip for all 24-hour, whereas you're supposed to have cortisol in your system for just spurts, especially as Canada starts to really adopt the 24-hour shift. We're coming back to the rec, and people are going to be very unhappy with this statement, but the Harvard doctor that did the study 20 years ago said the 24-hour is a terrible shift, that 1014s is better because, yes, you still get up at night, et cetera, but you aren't under 24-hour cortisol. And whether or not you're in the slowest place or the fastest place, the data suggests everybody has an elevated fight or flight response, basically, in minor scale when it works. So, yeah, I think the thing to remember is that your job's going to kind of take part of you, and you have to be paying attention to it.
Would you structure your career now looking back on it a bit different? Would you?
Nope. Okay. No regrets. It's been great. There's really kind of nothing you can do about it. I mean, at this point, if I want to be a firefighter in Seattle, I have to work a 24-hour shift. There's no choice. So, and working a 24-hour shift has been great, largely. I mean, yes, there's a little bit of cleanup to do now, but boy, I was able to raise my kids. I was able to do all those things. So, no, I wouldn't do anything different. I'm just glad to catch it, so to speak. And it really started making me think, like, boy, my dad was very similar as far as his dispositions and his way that he lived or lives. And he got cancer at 29 years. Well, one of the things she was talking about is not having enough sleep. You don't recover. Your body doesn't get a chance to go into the processes that it's supposed to do when you're sleeping. And then you're thinking, well, boy, so the body doesn't catch the errant cancer cell and remove it like it usually does, because you're sleep deprived. And what is cancer like? Well, it likes sugar. And if your body is releasing sugar consistently because it's tricked into being in this fight or flight state, you wonder if, was that the case? Was he 20 to 25 years saturated and then because that's at least what the data suggests is 20 to 25. So you can't do this forever. This new job is good because I can still go on the good runs and I can go on runs, but largely I'm looking at the job from a completely different standpoint, which is also healthy, because one of the things a lieutenant I worked with her on her last day, it was like 37 years, and actually the coffee that we did in Seattle for my kind of last day, we had a coffee clutch, not a big drink up, and she showed up and I got a chance to talk with her, and her name's Kim Leroy, and she's fantastic. And I said, I remember sitting in that beanery with you on your last shift and you going, yeah, my last shift was pretty similar to my first shift. House fire, couple AFAs, some medicals, car accident, not crazy busy, but right kind of covering all borders. And she's like, 37 years ago, I had damn near the same shift upon arrival, and I used basically the same tools and did the same thing. She's like, you got to change because otherwise it gets boring. Not that you don't like going on runs or all that, but let's be honest, at a certain point, certain types of runs, I'm not getting anything from it. It's boring, really. And so this job's been really good because I can look at things from an educational and operational architecture perspective and then still go on runs. So that's kind of cool. And I think that would be my advice to people is like, pay attention to the subtleties of what's going on, pay attention to physically, but also psychologically, like paying attention to like, don't get bored, because if you get bored, you get bitter. And that's what not having a nostalgia gene does for you. It's much more convenient and much more, I'm sure there are people in Seattle that are like, what's he doing? He could just ride it out here. I could, but I don't ride anything out. I'm going to engage the whole way. I'm not into coasting.
Yeah, talk more about the transition professionally. How has it been for you? How have you approached it?
It's been great. I knew the chief of where I was coming to. I've known him for a long time. The fire department has really switched it on in the last 15 years is in this cultural renaissance. The people are dynamite. They're engaged. People feel like they're valued. And so I'm coming into kind of a really nice spot. I think one of the things that, same kind of thing when I got promoted, people would ask a similar question, but in Seattle, they were always waiting for you to say, oh yeah, it's been really hard. It hasn't been that hard. And it's because I've done other things that have primed me for this event. Like I know how to deal with people when they're emotionally charged because I've done it. And I know how to write curriculum and keep people kind of in the paradigm or in the boundaries of what it is we're trying to do, because I've done it. I've managed a gym that was pretty competitive for a long time, which includes instructor development, coach development, all that stuff. So all the little things that go into the whole of the person, in my case, it's kind of all kind of lined up as far as, because you follow your interest, right? So that it's not like cosmic. It just is, it's where your interest is. And I've always been someone that doesn't like to I value my personal control and my personal decision making and all that. And so when I put myself in positions to kind of let other people take the lead completely and it ends up going off the rails, it drives me crazy. So not super good at that. So I've kind of always taken a hand in steering my own path. And sometimes I've steered it right straight into a concrete wall and had to back up and redeploy the airbags into the and redeploy. But it really hasn't been an excruciatingly difficult thing. There have been a few things, but nothing's blindsided me.
Do you have a team of training officers you're working with?
I have a team of trainers and I have a training chief, a battalion in training. He's dialed in, he's engaged, and the head chief is pretty dialed in and engaged as well. So, and has done a fair amount of coaching in the region and some outside the region. And so we've all worked around or with each other in the past. So it's not really that far away, right? And it's a pretty small community. So they knew what they were getting, and I knew who I was going to be working with. So that's been great. And then we have firefighters that are quote unquote subject matter experts. So they're the ones that will, if I'm doing a multi-systems or multi-discipline drill, I'll say, this is the drill, this is the purpose, here's the goal, the objective. Now let's talk about our individual methodologies, and we go that way. And then everybody kind of contributes. We write up lesson plans and then individual skill lesson plans from that. So we're working from a macro to a micro right now because we don't have a lot of recruits. Recruits will work the micros that we're developing from working big to little, and that'll be the procedures for them to work from little to big. So we're establishing a keystone evolutions, like the kind of core building types that we're going to see, core problems we're going to see, that it's like practicing against a standard offense or whatever. And we deviate from there. So there's where we're at right now. It's been really fun and neat to learn. And the demographics that I've worked with in the past is really helping me out because they have some demographics that I've never directly worked emergencies with, but I've worked with people that and helped people design curriculum for those that do work in these places. So these demographics. And so it's nice to have quite a Rolodex of folks that are like, shit, I don't know how to do that. Well, I do know somebody that's got a couple of good ideas. Call them up, get their ideas, throw them in front of the people that have done it here in Camano, and then come up with a conclusion. So, or at least something to research and development.
Has it been a breath of fresh air to go from, say, creation of curriculum to implementation to it making it onto the trucks and on the fire ground? Is that more of a seamless, easier process than it was in Seattle?
Yes, it's a little bit of apples and oranges in that these folks are going to an academy that myself and a couple of the Cadre members authored 10 years ago, 12 years ago. So they know the specialties that I kind of operate in. So yes, the stuff was already being done. There's some angles and some perspectives that I'm able to bring, having kind of worked it in so many different places. It has been easier, yes, because we're starting at a point where everybody kind of is operationally already got standard issue. With Seattle, it took a long time, but a long time to whom? The Seattle Fire Department or to Aaron Fields? I mean, it took my whole time that I worked there to get where we're at. But that's nothing in the grand scheme of local 27. So easier, different, I would say. The first few years were pretty tough in Seattle. There was a lot of what, and blah, blah, blah. And now it's actually really seamless because no one really remembers what they did or didn't do before, and there was no standard. So nothing was written down. There's no point of comparison because Seattle was very much an independent engine company or truck company, operated like they wanted to when I started. And they said, make it up as you go, and it was all about preference. And that's not the case anymore. So early on, it was more difficult, but recently in Seattle, it's been fairly easy. And because we've developed curriculum and Cadre, I don't need to lead the charge on everything. That's nice when you can you guys want to take on a new nozzle study, go for it. And so that's kind of where I'm at in the new spot. It's very analogous to where I was with SFD. So yeah, it's been good.
Do you see yourself maintaining the same travel and teaching calendar that you have for the past number of years with Nozzle Forward, or do you see that sort of easing off? What's your plan for the future?
My plan is to do the Nozzle Forward and the drilling for function, which we're doing more and more of. We'll come in and do a Nozzle Forward class and then stay and help orchestrate and give the folks kind of educational architecture. And so how can you do what we've done with this program with all your skill sets, and how should you organize different methodologies to organizing fire academies and in-service training and collation of your buildings and all of these things. It really is educational architecture or educational engineering. So we've been doing more of that. As far as lightening up, maybe the phone's still ringing and, we're booking into 27. So we'll see. We'll take it as it comes. It's actually easier to schedule now that I'm on a kind of a standard style schedule. But my love of airplanes has never been present. It's always a required evil. We're doing more larger classes. I mean, our class average size is 110. So we're looking at doing a few more like kind of places we've been a bunch that we know we can handle a lot of folks, like kind of super classes, like regional super classes, and then go out and cover some of the other smaller classes kind of in geographic waves. We've been running at about a 30 some odd, 33 to 38 class average a year. I think if we could make it work, which I think we're going to be able to, we'd probably like to be closer to like 25 to 30, somewhere in there. And people have become more patient because they know the reputation of what they're getting. They're like, yeah, we can schedule a year out, no problem. So that's been nice. At this point, we'll just keep plugging away. Then one day it'll dawn on me that I'll be like, oop, I'm done. And then turn it over to the other folks and completely and go from there.
Is that what you see it as? There'll be a succession planning that it'll continue on beyond you deciding to be leading it?
We've already kind of talked about it. The plan as it stands, and we've got another instructor. Before COVID, we did it with a lot of regularity. We haven't done it in a few years, but we do these kind of Cadre meetups where everybody brings their family, and we spend a couple of days going through every aspect of the curriculum and evaluating it. And as you know, we're all on the same page. I mean, that's one of the things that's very true, is that very few cadres, even in professional sports, are as in sync as this group is. You can literally finish each other's sentences, but everybody says things in a different way. So we'll take a topic X, and 3 people will present on it, and then we'll move to the next component, and we'll tinker with, if there's this variable and we don't have enough room to do drill Y before the end of day 1, how can we fit it on day 2? So it really is a meetup in which we work through the whole process and come up with options and variables. And then the families get to know each other and hang out, and there's all that stuff too that's super cool. And at one of those meetups, we started talking about it, and what came to be, and this was the vote of the folks at the Cadre, was not me. I abstained. Right now, the working plan is, when I retire, we've got 3 or 4 people that are going to step into lead positions. And when kind of the last person that wants to do it, that I brought on as a full instructor, is ready to call it, that's it. So we have a fixed time that we don't know what that is. But what we want to have happen is this infrastructure that we're building of manuals and NFPAs and academy models and all this stuff, all these videos and things that we're doing will continue to be free to people that have had the program. And we're collecting videos or technical documents on other hose manuals of people that use the same methodologies. And the plan is to have a library of kind of mainline library and secondary library. And the secondary library will be videos and manuals and drills and all this stuff from people that are using it but are outside that inner cadre. And then the inner cadre library, and it'll be all available to anyone that's ever had the class. So the idea is that, and it's already happening, that the curriculum is if you think about how many people have done it and how little it varies, as far as deviation of application is minimal, considering how many people in how many different regions. I mean, you go to a class, and as you have, and you've mentioned it to me, you go to a class and you can immediately pick out somebody that's done this curriculum, and you can work with them. And there's not a lot of I in our thing. It's all we. And that's what gives it legs. Right? Is firefighters often say what I like to do, and what we should be saying is, this is what we do. That standard issue approach, where you cannot, to quote a document, in order to accomplish the intent of an order in a mobile diversified command structure, and this is more of a paraphrase, you have to operate from a set of standard operating guidelines and standard technical aspects. So like when people say, I want to be part of a team, well, the team runs the same play. And that individual improvisation is only possible once you've started with a we. And you mean, we never go, I like this. This is what we do. This is what we do, why we do it, when we do it, and how. In that order every time. So what that's led to is people that really understand what it is they're doing. And that is more important than getting technical competency in a 2-day class. If you have intellectual fluidity and comprehension, you can technically grow. But the other way does not work. And so that's the plan, is to have this network of people that don't have any financial issue or investment, and therefore things remain simple. And inevitably, because the fire service likes to be special, somebody will take, well, I do this or I do that. But anyone that's been through this program knows that's a fallacy. You can't decide you're going to shoot your rifle in a different way. If you're a Marine, you shoot it the way the Marines tell you to shoot it. You clear rooms the way the Army, it's the 6 battle drills that the Army does. I mean, and they have way more variables than we do. So how can they be so procedurally driven? And we have to be, the difference is going to look at a ballet and looking at improvisational dance. Nobody likes improvisational dance. Nobody can understand what those people in tights are doing. But when you go to ballet, you appreciate it, because even if you don't know exactly what you're looking at, because every ballerina does the same series of movements. And really they do the movements with you and I aren't going to be able to tell. And what makes the Swan Lake different than the Nutcracker is how those moves are done, the sequence of those moves and the context of those moves. Instead of like what fire service does is just the equivalent of showing up in tights and acting out your emotions on stage. No one knows what's happening. The music's terrible. It's like, what is going on? It's like, that's the equivalency. So our job is to make it more like ballet. If everybody goes position 1, hip grip, everybody does it basically the same. Okay, the hip grip doesn't work. Go to your splint. Okay, from your splint, go to your bang, 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 bang. So that's the goal.
It has to be one of the biggest barriers for every fire department that each firefighter doesn't see themselves as part of the team of the fire department. They're broken into, our crew does it this way, or our platoon does it this way. And they can't just get on board with the team mentality as the department. And if they want to make changes, you can do that work in the background to change how we do it. But until then, this is how we do it.
When I was in Seattle, there's a particular officer that was just hell-bent on telling everybody that came through their station that they don't do that stuff. And when asked what stuff, their reaction was, that stuff. They are hell-bent that they prefer the fog nozzle because, man, that power cone has sure worked for them. And that's just wrong, right? We know that's wrong. And we know where that comes from, and we know why era they come out of, and we know why they learned it. We know what was being misunderstood. People want to go, Lloyd Lehman was wrong. No, he wasn't. He was right in his context, and they missed the part that he says you would never do this when anybody's in the building, and including firefighters. This was nautical tactics. This was shipboard firefighting tactics be employed to void spaces where steam conversion and all that, it didn't matter. And that's not where we operate inside buildings. So my thing has always been like, when does the company officer that's doing that, the sergeant that says, hey, I know you got taught how to use a machine gun, but that's not how I do it. I like to put one round in at a time. That's not the point of the machine gun. If you were a military, paramilitary is what we say, but if you were actually military and you were a lieutenant who had a sergeant in your platoon that wasn't doing standard issue, they would not be a sergeant in your platoon anymore. They would be told with no ceremony, no concern with how they felt about it, that this isn't what we're going to do, and here's the data that proves it. And that's one of the things that we've always done, and I've always done, is because I had some period of time where I learned how to be an academic and I operated in that arena. I treat the fire service and my research as an academic. It's not a question of what I think. It's what a question I can prove and the deductions I can draw from an annotated bibliography. And so because I operate that way, this lieutenant in particular is wrong. They're wrong about thermodynamics. They are wrong about the fire environment. I would always wonder why these chiefs that were telling me that they were chiefing and that chiefing was super hard don't step in and say, Lieutenant, that's not what you're going to do. You're going to do this. You can't go around saying that. This is standard issue. This is what the Seattle Fire Department has adopted. And you're going to have to operate within that paradigm. That does not take away your ability to make a choice in improv, but you can't say, well, that infantry school is just bullshit, especially when you're wrong. And that's part of the issue. We always talk about what we think. Fuck what you think. What you think can be wrong. What do you know from research and experience? People think that moving the nozzle the other direction is going to pull the energy back on them, yet they go left to right when they're making their upside down U and right to left. It's like what we were told is one thing, but it's our job to be intellectually curious and validate all these things to make sure that what we think is based upon data. And really, if your data is good and you've interpreted your experience through a lens of understanding, then your experience should not be in conflict with your data. And if it is, there was a variable, and that's what a scientist would try to do, figure out what the variable was. It befuddles me that we say we're paramilitary, yet we're not even close. Hey, Sergeant, I heard that you were saying the U.S. Army Infantry School is fake. Yeah, well, that's not what's going to happen. You're going to do it our way, or you're not going to do it. Yeah, there'd be no hesitation. And guys are like, oh, I don't want to really say anything because that person is hard to deal with. What's harder to deal with is carrying a box because they did something wrong. I mean, we're talking about complete and utter non-truths. Yeah, that's kind of the staff that would swear, well, this is a chain of command, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't understand how a chain of command actually works. There's no way in the Seattle Fire Department for a firefighter to write up an officer for behavior unbecoming. You can do that in the military. The troops answer to their officers, and the officers are beholden to answer to the troops and the officers above them. You can't say you're one thing when you're not. At times it's befuddling. It's just befuddling. It doesn't make sense. If you say one thing, you've got to follow through with it. You've got to play it out the way that it's meant to be played out completely. Intellectual consistency. So going back to my health thing, it's funny that when that study came out that said, listen, you need to think about 1014s. And the same time, people were like, I need my hour and a half or hour of PT. And my station needs to have more weight equipment because that's what's good for me. Okay, what's good for you? I get it. I think it's right. I think you should have that stuff. But if what we're going to say, if the premise is not only what do I personally want because where my values lie, in addition to it's good for me, if all you're going to say is it's good for me, well, then what's good for you is 1014s. Well, I don't want to do that. Oh, so it's what's convenient for you is what you're really saying there. Instead of saying it isn't only what's good for me. It's also what I like to do. And it gives me a moment of reprieve and all of these things. So it's that whole intellectual consistency thing. I'm not going to say that I'm 100%, but boy, I work at it. I mean, you can't tell me that you're pro-choice and then tell me for something that has no real evidence yet that it's going to be the pandemic that everyone said it was going to be. If you tell me you're pro-choice when it comes to someone's, in the United States, when it comes to someone's uterus, then you're pro-choice. You can't be pro-choice 1 minute, and then when you're afraid, you are all of a sudden, no, you shall get. And the reverse happened, where the people that are traditionally been like, nope, I can legislate morality. I don't think you don't have pro-choice, are now like, my body, my choice. It's like, you fucking hypocrites. Like, pick one. How about that? And play it out. Even when it's not your personal choice, you can make another choice. But you can't tell me that you're pro-choice when you're also willing to tell people that they have to do it your way. Mm-hmm. It's that whole intellectual consistency thing. Everything I'm talking about is intellectual consistency. Be intellectually consistent. And if you are, then explain when you're not why you are making an individual choice to not be. But you can't use blanket statements. And then it ends up being, what do we want? That's really what people are talking about. I'm afraid that I'm going to die from this, so you need to get that. But when it's Sarah down the street, she gets to choose. So I'm pro-choice for the record. And if it was Ebola, there'd be people lining up to get the shot because Ebola kills everybody. But the difference in death rate in Texas and Washington State, who handled that whole thing very differently, the difference in death rate was like 0.2 and 0.26. The infection rate of Texas at the height of it was twice as much as Washington State, though it's 4 times larger. So it's like these blanket things instead of, hey, if you have X, Y, and Z, you need to be paying attention to this. The data suggests everybody wants an answer all the time. And I think that it's a process. The process of coming to conclusions and being comfortable saying, shit, we don't know yet. So let's take a conservative tack. Okay, fair. And then also, the other thing goes with people in North America and the United States specifically, somebody telling them what to do is culturally is a taboo, right? We aren't hive mind. That our cultural identity is individual, but it's just intellectual consistency is the key to critical thought.
Specializing in machinery rescue and forcible entry, Rescue Squad Ironworks builds world-class heirloom quality training props for your fire department. Designed and built by firefighters for firefighters, and backed by years of fireground experience and training across North America, they are reliable, realistic, and repeatable, allowing you to train multiple students and be extremely cost-efficient. Find RSI on Instagram at rescue_squad_ironworks or via email at rescuesquadironworks@gmail.com. Let hard work be your legacy.
Talk to me about doing what's right for the sake of doing what's right, regardless of whether it's going to result in a positive change. So how can people find solace in the work for the sake of it, even though they may be in a department where they may not see the positive change, but they're still putting in the work?
That's a great question. Personally, this has been full transparency. My kind of, fuck you, you can't tell me what to do. I'm not going to do that because it's wrong. I mean, has potentially has put me in some tough spots, but I'm okay with them because it's what ethically, that's my kind of thing for me personally, is I don't compromise my ethics. My ethics can change, but there was a time, there's some shenanigans going on in Seattle that no one can really explain, and you hear one thing from another and another from another. So you know that it's a lot of shadows and gray, and out of service companies for private events, just whatever. And it bothers me. And I've talked with a lot of chiefs, and I always say respectfully, I have to say this, yada, 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 say my part. I take some umbrage with this decision. Here's why. And usually the chiefs are like, yeah, we get it. I understand, but this is the order coming down. And I'm like, fair enough. But the one day that I got told by a chief that I didn't understand what was going on, I followed the order, but I put a giant ass sign on the front of the station explaining why we were out of service
for 9 hours, and where we were in service, which wasn't in our district. And yeah, anyway, and that could have got me some pretty substantial charges. And the crew was a little jumpy, and I'm like, I take the hit. I'm doing this. I followed the order, but I think the order is unethical.
And you serve the community.
I serve the community, and that's who I work for. At the end of the day, I don't work for these chiefs. I work for them, but we all work for the public. And that's the ultimate boss. Chiefs are in the chain of command. I respect the position. I mean, many of the guys and gals in Seattle are phenomenal, but at every rank, there are people that are not. And so as far as doing the right thing, Scott, that's a great one. And I think, and I've only been able to articulate this in the last probably year and a half, because I've watched it occur time and time again. And it always felt weird. And I realized kind of through introspection what the difference was. And that's that I firmly believe that the reason to do these things, and I hear firefighters always say, oh, I'm trying to leave it better for. Okay, so you're doing it for an external feature, which means your success is based upon variables that you have no control over. The way you leave it better, and this is, I guess, why I think this is one of the roots to the success or whatever success we've had, is that this is a little vulgar, but my field of fucks are fallow. I don't care what people think, which is like, sounds trite, but it really isn't. I'm trying to be, in everything that I'm doing, I live with a degree of deliberacy. And that deliberacy means I'm going to change. And that deliberacy means I'm trying to figure out who I wish I was as a husband, as a father, as a friend, as a firefighter. I am growing myself by making intellectually consistent choices that are well thought out and sometimes wrong, but admitting that wrong. And the reason I'm doing all of these things is because I want to be the person I wish I was, not the person that I am. And so, I was just on the phone with a guy who's really well-intended, but his motivation is a bit childish. It's like, quit telling me about all this impact you want to have. If you want to have impact, the way to have impact is not on others. It's on yourself. Be the person you wish you were, and then you'll open up the door and you'll make it culturally viable for someone else to make that choice. But fundamentally, and this is one of the mistakes that people make, is you can't push people to do things. They do them by choice. You give them an opportunity if they're working around you. But I can't make someone do the program. They choose to do the program. And their success in the program comes from their work, not my work. My work is for me. I guess that's the point. When I hear guys say, I want to leave it better, I want to leave it better, I want to leave it better, I can predict that more than likely they are going to leave bitter, because at some point they're going to get resistance. And they're saying, you just should listen to what I'm saying, instead of, I'm just going to do me. And if you like it, awesome, we can do together. And if you don't, that's fine too. Do your thing. And I think that's the thing, is that this leadership concept is too often in the fire service discussed like business school. It's not business school. Your life's not a fucking pie chart. You do what you do because it's what you should do. And if you make it okay and culturally acceptable because you're doing it and you're being inclusive, not exclusive, I mean, consider how many of the cadres out there and the teaching out there is effectively the narrative of there's those guys and us. We're the ones that have got it figured out, but we're, the spunky rebellion with the evil empire of apathy overlaying me, and I'm fighting back. It's a counter, it's like, it's not a counterculture movement. It is the movement of the culture. You can fight the power from a power position. You don't have to be in opposition. And really what ends up happening with that is the narrative, not the skills, are what turn people off. If I hear another fucking name that sounds cute because it makes nice TikToks and birds out, it's just like, oh, I got it. You're the people that nobody likes. You're the martyrs. Like, there's a Jesus narrative to it. And what ends up happening is at some point they run into opposition. And because they're doing it for other people, then what's it worth anymore? Why do I care anymore? Why do I care when they don't? I think really the problem with our model for this is that leadership is a series of characteristics that are exhibited at every level, and leaders are leading themselves because that's the only people that they can lead. And they're setting a tone for what is acceptable. They're being accountable, and they're doing the very thing that they say that they want other people to do. And at the end of the day, I think the best example of it, and I've given this example before, but the easiest way to illustrate it is when the 101st Airborne were making inroads into France in World War II. So I read a lot, and there's an author by the name of Stephen Ambrose, who's a famous American U.S. historian. I think his best book was Citizen Soldier and Undaunted Courage, but the one that got the most publicity was Band of Brothers. You listen to the interviews or you read the book, when people talk about Colonel Winters, they all say he was an exceptional, the best battleground leader they ever had, that he would never ask you to do something he wouldn't. Some of them said I liked him. He was like my father that ran away during the Depression, or like my older brother. I looked up to him. And some of them said, I didn't really like him. He was pretty straight-laced. I'm not. I was drunk chasing French women. He busted me for doing that. But I trusted him. On the battleground, there's nobody else you wanted. Well, they were making this inroads in, and there was an elevated railroad track. If I recall the book right, there was an elevated railroad track that was 8-10 feet up. And on the other side of the track were the Germans, Nazis, real Nazis, not people today that are screaming someone that doesn't agree with them as a Nazi. Literally, they're not Nazis. They disagree, not figuratively. Literally, my face was on fire. No, figuratively, your face was on fire, for fuck's sake. Some of us, anyway, that's a pet peeve. And Winters says charge, and nobody moves. And he looks down the line, and this has been recounted by multiple people within almost 100% accuracy. So it really happened. It's not a fanciful retelling. And he looks down the line, racks his submachine gun, and he goes over the berm. And that's when they follow. At the end of the day, I think that's it. You can't push people to do things. 80 some odd percent of the CEOs, American U.S. officers in Vietnam were shot in the back. I mean, it was maybe not 80, but it was a huge number because they were pushing people to do things. And really, I think in our arena, this thing comes around the beginning of trust. And if you trust that the other people are holding themselves to the same standard, and all I worry about is what I can affect, which is me, then when somebody says no, I'm not put out. I'll never hit the point of, well, those guys just don't listen. They don't care, so why should I? And that's a quote or a paraphrase that I've heard hundreds of times. And you should, because it's the right goddamn thing. It's your oath. And your oath is between you and it. I think that's the juxt of it. And I think there's also an interesting point, and I've read this book, I don't know, 3 or 4 times, and it has become one of my most favored books regarding this kind of a thing. And it gets classified as a business book, but it's not business. It's culture creation. There's a lot of language in it, so that there's a big language component, and that rings true with me. But in this last reading of the book called Legacy, which is about the New Zealand All Black rugby team, there's a point in there talking, and I don't remember who was saying it, but there's one of their captains. This goes back to your life isn't a pie chart. And this is what we do in our culture. And he says, when an All Black, a new player is coming up, if they say to them, the mission of the All Blacks is to win rugby matches. That's the mission. And by being an All Black, you're saying that when you're on the pitch is the thing that matters. And then when they get a player that'll say, well, I care about this more than anything, except my family. I care more about my family. They don't want you. And he says, and I don't remember exactly how he says it. It's much more eloquent than this. But you're either all in or you're not. And your life isn't a pie chart. And when you're on the pitch, what your kids are doing doesn't fucking matter. What matters is winning the rugby match. And when you're at home, you know what doesn't matter? Winning the rugby match. Your kids are what matter. And so what it's really saying, he's saying is, we don't ask you to divide up your love into 10% for this and 40% for that. We're asking you to prioritize whatever's in front of you and put all 100% into what's in front of you. That's one of the points that I've struggled with, because when I've tried to talk about this in other settings, people are like, what? How can you say that? And it's like, because in the moment is where you need to live. That doesn't mean my family is not important. That means at this moment, my mission is this, and I'm pretty mission driven. And so when I read this book for the third or fourth time, and every time I get something new out of it, this time, that's what stood out. It's like, that's right. Your life isn't a pie chart. And we don't need platitudes. We need people that are all in. And people will ask, well, shit, I've never not been all in on my relationship. People that have heard me talk about your life's not a pie chart, you're all in to what's in front of you. That's why my marriage is successful. Why my kids and I get along, because I'm all in when I'm there. And when they take up my entire focus. And when I'm out on the fire or I'm at work, I'm all in there, to the point of, and this goes back to one of the earlier points, I was asked recently on an interview, did your family hang out at the fire station? No. I didn't hang out when I was a kid, because my dad said the same thing, which is, I can't be your father or a husband and a firefighter at the same time. I need to be focused. This is my place of employment. And I'm not able to split it up. I don't let my hair down. I'm the same way. I think my wife's been into a fire station maybe 5 times in 25 years. And my kids have stopped by maybe 3. And it's usually in and out, because I can't be the guy I need to be for them and focused on them, and then have this and those people that are relying on me thinking about them, and vice versa. I think the problem with our society is we want to have it nice and neat and packaged, when in fact, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing completely. And then when it's not worth doing at that moment, that doesn't mean it's not important. That means it's being set aside until its importance spins around on the dial again. I mean, you and I have talked a couple of times about like balancing life with the traveling and the work. That's how it happens. But what I'm not doing is going out, and when I'm at home, I'm not watching television. I'm not turning my kids over to a computer game. I'm all in. For me, the reading that this time was, I guess the term would be an affirmation. Like, that's right. And these guys are some of the best in the world at this. And they have a culture of this, and it's consistent generationally. And that's why. What's the mission? The mission is winning rugby matches. It's underrated. concept.
And given some of the situations that we could find ourselves in as firefighters, I think if we asked our family, when I'm in that moment, do you want me to have my thoughts and feelings split between you and work, or do you want me all in that moment? I think, ironically, like the most important thing you could be is all in, because that ensures that you come home.
I think it's one of those things that people just say without really thinking about it, which is kind of what we've been talking about this whole time, of being deliberate in action and word and intent, and being deliberate. And that comes from being in the moment. The older I get, the more that seems important.
And even on a spiritual level, right? All the great books and prophets and gurus talk about the present moment, like learning how to be in the present moment.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think it's rocket science. I think people want it to be complicated because there's some degree of it makes them feel more important. If it's complicated, they must be really moving and grooving. And I'm like, man, it's really basic. Be intentional, be purposeful, be in the moment, be accountable, be honest, and be approachable. I don't know if you need much, and have a good work ethic and a good sense of humor, because shit's going to happen and it'll eat you up. That kind of comes back to you're doing it for other people or you're doing it for yourself. I think it's just doing it for yourself. My kids and that was a few years ago now, but to sum that part up is my youngest kid, we were driving in the car and we were talking, and my youngest kid had solved a problem through touching at school. Some kid was being handsy with a classmate and she wasn't able to remedy it herself. And so my boy stepped in and he handled it and did so convincingly. And I was telling him that I think that's great. And there was some worry that I was going to get suspended. And I'm like, let him suspend you. Mm-hmm. I don't care. You did the right thing. Who cares? He's like, well, that'll do this and that'll do that. And I'm like, it won't do any of that. Listen, you made the choice. That's the harder choice to make. It's the right thing to do. And despite what your school rules say, Washington state law protects you for those things. That's Good Samaritan laws. And Washington is a non-retreat state. So if somebody says something, you don't have to back up. If somebody takes a pop at you, you can defend yourself. And that's exactly what happened. So even by the law, not by the school rule, but by the law, he was right. And so we're sitting there talking and I'm like, but let's play devil's advocate for a second and just see if there's a way and a place in this engagement where you could have steered it to a non-final solution with picking him up and throwing him down. And so we start talking it through, and I'm like, I want to be very clear. I'm not critiquing you. I think this is awesome. I think you did the right thing. Let's just play this and talk through. And finally, my oldest kid starts laughing and said, remember Safeway parking lot last week, Dad? And I'm like, oh, yeah. And he's like, Hugh just did what you did. And I'm like, I know. And he did the right thing. But I want to be very clear with both of you. I'm not raising yourselves, nor myself to be the person I am. I'm raising you and still raising myself to be the person that I wish I was. And that requires that we evaluate the things we do, whether they feel right or wrong, to see whether or not they were the best choice. That's the crux of it. Like so many people in our industry want to do it for somebody else. I'm trying to leave it better. I'm trying to leave it better. And it's like, well, if you're trying to leave it better by influencing other people, then you're going to leave bitter and sad, because the only person you totally have control over is yourself. And if you're relying upon yourself, then you're not reliant upon external attaboys or you sucks to affect how you feel about it.
Identities and groups and flags and patches, that can all change, right?
Yeah, it can all change. And I think what would be nice, right, when I got asked to show my first class, I was younger. And there were times that I've overstepped and I've been misinterpreted because of
what people would deem brashness or lack of thinking it through before I said it. And in those cases, I've always tried to remedy it. I've always admitted I overstepped that one. Maybe a little less blue collar humor at points. Like, who would have known that Las Vegas was 30% Mormon? So when you're teaching a class in Vegas, and Utah's pretty close, I didn't know that the city of sin was largely owned by Mormons. You probably shouldn't make a polygamy joke. That went over like a fart in church. And later I found out there was like 3 people in the class of 70 or 60 that weren't Mormon. And you're like, oh shit, I didn't mean, yep, well, oops. So, I mean, everybody overstates, but I would hope that in time, some of these folks would grow up and that they would change their messaging and packaging to be what it is they really mean, rather than the brashness that gets them likes on TikToks and the social media world. They're catering to the same thing that most news caters to, shock and awe. Because a lot of them have reasonable stuff or good stuff to show. But boy, if I don't want to hear about story time and cute pictures of you taken with gear and cigars telling everybody that you're fucking doing it. Shut up. You got enough time to do that. You got time for another rep. It comes back to, I've rolled around with guys that were in the Olympics, and you know what they didn't do? Take selfies. They just kept grinding over and over and over again. They didn't need anybody to know they were doing it. Mm-hmm. They just did it. So I try to kind of use that as my personal barometer as to what I'm going. And it's why kind of the whole pride thing is a really interesting question, because I think it has to do a lot with your definition of it, or your semantical definition of it.
But you can take pride in your work or be proud of the work you've done.
Yep. In so much of what it's going to lead to.
Right.
I mean, like, I'm proud of the work that Rhonda and I have done. But really what makes me proud of it is that it's a collaborative effort, that we've both grown together, not apart, and that what comes next, shit, I got at least a few more years with her. That's going to be awesome, you know? So my kids, I take some pride in how my kids manage themselves as adults. Like, my 17-year-old and my 20-year-old are more adult than most adults. Like, deep conversation and self-reflection, and their performance in their arenas are reflections of that. And so that I'm proud of what they've done, because I had a hand in helping them figure out their process, not my process, their process to the pursuit of excellence. And one kid takes a very different tact, not very different, but relatively speaking different, but he gets there and it's procedural. And the other guy is a little more similar in his disposition. I think his brain works in a similar way as mine, like the way he learns information. And so his procedures are very, very similar. And he has to work on a lot of the things that I had to work on at his age, which is being able to say that was a good performance instead of it could have been better. I made this mistake. I made that mistake, which I've always been pretty self-critical, and to the point of sometimes not a benefit. And so I'm trying to help him manage expectation and realizing that it's all a process, and to not beat yourself up quite so much sometimes. So yeah, I'm proud of that. He's getting there.
Where do you see your passion going or deepening once the fire service is done?
I'm looking at a couple of things. One thing I wanted to do, and I've always wanted to do it, and if I didn't get into the fire service, it was what I was going to go into, or at least I thought I was. I'm going to build boats, and I'm going to boat. I live right by the ocean, the big one, so I'm going to spend some time building boats, mostly small, nothing giant, like probably nothing over 25, maybe 30 feet. But a lot of them are going to be like, I'm going to start with a sailing
outrigger canoe, probably do a sailing trimaran based off some of the Hawaiian models with the kind of a little more modern of a twist, so I can pack up the gear in the summers, grab the kids, and we can, when they're home from colleges, and we can do the inland passage. So take a month and sail, paddle up to Alaska and then come back. And the other one, this new job is very proactive, and they are encouraging education and supporting their members getting education. So I've been thinking heavily about some sort of advanced degree in brain science with a focus on psychomotor skill acquisition and cognitive linguistics in regards to that and that kind of thing. That's become really interesting to me over the last 20 years. Is the human brain is a superpower, and we largely don't understand. And I think some of that comes from because as I've been able to get a little more experience in the kind of the psychomotor skill aspect and linguistics, cognitive linguistics. And it started with my kind of exposure to those coaches back in the day. And then promptly a woman by the name of Gwen Williams, who is one of the most gifted educators that I've ever met, and was really instrumental in kind of shaping my or getting me started with kind of the brain science of learning. And I think that the brain's a superpower. And Gwen was one of the ones that helped me realize that if you tap that power, if you figure out your process, and Gwen was one of the ones that helped me realize that what I had taken kind of in myself without kind of saying so as a kid, I always kind of thought I had a borderline learning disability because I couldn't do a multiple choice question test to save my life. And I can read and I can process information, but I couldn't recall it in that format. And she didn't teach me what my brain style was, but she was the one that was, hey, you should look at this, and this is what's going on, and She was the kind of the spark of my interest in the actual, not teaching, but the act of learning. And what I have come to realize is, according to some neuroscientists, and who knows, it's not better, it's not worse, but my brain operates in a realm that usually a very low percentage of society thinks this way or interprets information this way. Traditionally, it's called spatial visual, but that definition has kind of gone the way of the dodo bird. The easiest way to say it is I play bass and I play baritone saxophone. And if you tried to sit me down and beat music theory into me, I couldn't remember it. But when I saw John Coltrane's drawing, The Circle of Fifths, I understood music theory. Apparently, a lot of kind of people that were often considered kind of quacky because they process information differently and so what Gwen helped me realize and why it's become important to me is that for the long time, I kind of thought like, well, I'm good at some things, but I can't get the other things. And I'm just not that smart in that way. And now that I know that it isn't a disability, it's just different, and that everyone's somewhat different, though there are some tendencies. Once I learned to tap that superpower, that's where the idea of fictional continuity comes from. It's this mechanical, and what supposedly, according to a couple of the neuroscientists that I'm reading, have said is that this type of brain process recognizes patterns exceptionally well and uses that pattern recognition to solve problems versus, so what it is it's like there's a visual, there's, the way I think of information, it's moving in my mind based upon what is that focus in the moment. But what this brain doesn't do well is data for data's sake. Trivia questions. I suck at promotional exams because it's a trivia game. I couldn't remember dates until I had a teacher in college that taught me cycles. Like, this is what's happening. bing, bing, bing. Here are the causes and effects, laid out history in terms of its relationship over time and space. And this creates this, which creates this. And then I can remember dates. But if you trade me dates and then try to tell me what was going on, I'll never remember the date. If you tell me what was going on and then, hey, by the way, it's kind of an engineering style brain, I guess. But that's what's become really interesting to me, because it's just, your brain is a superpower and we don't use enough of it because other things get in the way. Other things that we bring to the table get in the way. And man, if you could just tap that and whatever the subject matter, use the same process over and over. And I've kind of done that already in 2 different sports and the fire. And that's become really, really rewarding and really interesting to be able to kind of cut through the noise of the veneer and get to the structure of the engine and realize, like you said earlier, what is that universal principle of being in the moment? I mean, that's really what we're looking for. We're looking for principles that are applicable and are cross-platform, to use a modern metaphor. So, yeah, that's what's become really interesting. I'm going to watch a lot of lacrosse, college lacrosse, even before I retire, because both boys are on their way now. One's already there and the other one's committed. So that's probably it. I mean, read some more books, hang out, walk my dog, maybe go exploring, like maybe start doing expedition stuff, like getting a car, driving, getting in a boat, or getting in a boat and going for 6 months and like spending time putzing around where there's not a lot of people, going up to the boundary waters and the Canadian side of the boundary waters and doing that kind of stuff. I always felt like if I was in another era, I would have loved to have been in the era of Shackleton. I mean, Endurance and Shackleton is like the greatest adventure story ever written, and it's real. That whole era of like National Geographic is sending people out to Siberia to walk through space, that that would have been my thing in that era. And to be honest with you, had I not kind of met my wife and gotten serious, there's nothing saying that I would have sailed out and I'd be just coming back to the States now. I like that. What's over the hill? Intellectual curiosity.
On the topic of boats, I saw a great video the other day of a guy who started building boats from used skateboards. He just figured it out. I'm going to have to share it with you because it's boat building and it's also a little punk leanings there, right?
Yes. Yeah, for sure. That's pretty cool. I'd totally be into that. That's a great idea. I'd love to see that. Make sure you send that to me.
Yeah. And just hearing you talk about styles of learning, it's cool how you've shared information with what is tens of thousands of firefighters now, right? And obviously the program has been accessible to all of them. Like you've been purposeful, deliberate in how you can deliver something across North America to tens of thousands. And the structure of the program is accessible to everybody and across all those learning styles.
That's what we're supposed to be doing. It's our oath. If we put ourselves into a position, for whatever reason, that somebody asks you to share something with them, then you have the obligation to try to be good at it. The person doesn't exist for you to teach the class or for you to pontificate. The situation exists for them to acquire skills. So again, it's mission. And this got me in trouble. I mean, there's a chief in particular who I really respect, but I think there's personal conflict on their side. And it's because when they brought me down to training as a firefighter, the stated goal was just to modify and remedy and fix how we were training. And that was my mission. They gave me that mission. And I think at times maybe I wasn't good enough at explaining that I am going to advocate for that mission, even when it's in juxtaposition with what they need. And I would always be told, well, you don't have the whole picture. And I'm like, that is correct. I don't. But on this subject, I do. I haven't more so than anybody here because I've done it more than anybody here. Not because I'm better or anything like that. It's a statement of experience. Like, if you're going to ask me to do a mission, and then whenever somebody says, well, that can't happen, and then ask me to not advocate, my job is to advocate for the success of the mission. And that does not mean you have to go my way. And I think that this particular power structure in Seattle is not used to that. It's very much still master and commander next to God. What your officer says you do, whether or not it's the right thing or the wrong thing. And that kind of open conversation, I made the assumption, and this is where my mistake was, that they were open to these kinds of conversations, but they weren't. And I'd come to meetings where I'd have given a document out 3 weeks before and nobody had read it. So they're operating from assumptions of what was being done or said, but it's all listed out there, including the glossary that defined the terms, for fuck's sake. And so there's moments when I'd get frustrated with that because I would be like, oh my God, if I showed up to a meeting that this person had said I needed to read this before I came to the meeting, I'd get yelled at. But they can do it because they outrank me. Instead of canceling the meeting and going, I'm not ready yet, there was too many other things plying on me. Or saying, Fields, I understand what you're saying. I'm going to think about it. You don't need a staff judgment. Or Fields, I understand what you're saying, but there's several other things that are applying on this. We have to go another way. I can deal with that. But just saying no and not giving a reason why when you've asked me to do something that I'm qualified to do is frustrating. And I think that kind of put me at odds with people there. All I've ever wanted to do is what I was asked to do. I guess I'm not sorry because I was doing what I was supposed to do. It's unfortunate that I think some of those relationships are damaged, but they were going to be damaged one way or another at some point if a person is not capable of this kind of conversation, because I'm going to do this direct, upfront, non-emotional conversation. And we can agree to disagree, right? But as far as affecting people with different brain styles, I think a lot is made of that, and they should be. But really, that information in my mind is for the learner, not the coach. The coach has to present an opportunity that allows every learner to have a space where they can pick it up. Like my lecture, people think my lecture is when they first start listening to it, is random and a little chaotic because I'm using these funny examples or a musical reference. But what I'm doing is anchoring data X in multiple locations in your mind, which is your brain memorizes data based upon its context of learning it. So if I can take something and putting in the technical part, the visual part, the funny part, the music part, what I'm doing is making neurological pathways so that no matter what part picks up that piece of information in real time, all of those other things fire and as simultaneously on an electrical level. So you're literally using more of your brain and you are more open to stimuli for recognition prime decision making because it's anchored in many points. Too many people want to put it all in one section, all the technical aspect. That's not recoverable for everybody. Some people need to have a visual cue. Some people relate to humor. Humor is a big one. Pairing the breaking down of solids to the digestion of tacos is pretty simple, but anchors what's happening in people's minds. So I think the presentation of the data has to be accessible. And in order to do that, you have to be able to know your material well enough that you can adjust and you can use the kind of the different basic paradigms for learning so that everyone has access. That's not that hard to do if you just practice it. And you limit your scope. Like, for fuck's sake, you can't be doing 16 different disciplines in the fire service. Like, that's just not real. You're not at that level with all of them.
The longer I'm on, the more it makes sense to have the more quote unquote American style of engines and trucks and specialization if you have the size and staffing to do so?
I think that standard operating guidelines are plays. They're the same as a quarterback calling a play. And you've got to recognize that there are probabilities and that you work from probable to possible as far as what's likely going to happen. That being said, this is a gross generalization, but typically speaking, because Canadians use that kind of duty based upon arrival approach, it ends up leading to a kind of a more chaotic initial arrival. And I think there's gaps that things can get missed in the ICS because of the fog of war kind of thing. But that ICS model that's more, or whatever you guys are calling it, that kind of command center focused deployment of troops is really, really beneficial in large events. And one of the things I've noticed from looking at some of your PIAs, your post-incident analysis, and some of ours is when they go big, you guys do a really good job of tracking where things are at and what's happening. But I think where you could improve is having guidelines that, like, yeah, my engines and trucks are different, or they do different jobs. So you don't have to think about your first truck is going search. The minute the first truck is on, search is being done. Your second truck is doing this. Your first engine is doing this, because engines do water better than trucks do, or aerials. Pumpers do better than aerials, and aerials do things that engines can't. So I think having those first 5 engines, or how many of you have your coming on the first alarm, scripted is, which doesn't mean you can't improv. It means that every time isn't an audible. Now the audible is in contrast with the play. So really the scale and scope of the management or the command structure is based upon what's going on, I think. And having procedures makes things super easy to follow. It also gets things accomplished in rapid order. Having an ICS allows you to do those mini standard operating guidelines a little more controlled. You don't have people running all over. So there's not one or the other, but I think your industry on that side of the border, our industry on that side of the border would benefit. And I think it's pretty evident as more and more places are going to it. I mean, that's becoming 30% of the classes we're doing, damn near 30% are in Canada these days. And people are taking the documents that we've written for like general engine guidelines. They're taking them and they're morphing them into themselves. And then they're so it seems to be that more and more Canadian departments are actually embracing that kind of deployment model. And I think we could, and down below the line, could benefit from paying attention to some of the streamlined, larger command and control type methodology that you guys use. Because we are either really good or it's all hell's breaking loose. Making it up as they go after they exceed guidelines.
Just that idea of each person only being so capable of being good at so many things. And I've wondered sometimes even just about the people that are seen as outcasts because they aren't good across the board at everything. Maybe they would be a really great outside vent. And if that was their job, they specialize in that. So would that person be happier at their job? Would they be more welcomed into the fold, even on that regard?
I think you have a professional requirement at all the required skills. And you're going to specialize based off what you do more and what you're attracted to. But you do have to keep, I mean, one of the problems that we've had is we've had truck guys in Seattle that haven't been on an engine in years, and now they pull an overtime shift on engine, and engine's being done entirely different. They're functionally dead weight, like, because they have gotten so hyper-focused. So if you work in an agency that can allow for that because of your numbers and all that, awesome.
If you work in a more moderate size agency where you might have to do different jobs every day, well, then you have an obligation to uphold all your skills to that professional level. And then you find the one that you do the most in, or that you enjoy the most, and you deep dive in. I was referring more to the point of coaching or teaching, depending on what context it's in. You can't be good at coaching or teaching 15 different things. It's really one or two, maybe. And I think the best people out there typically stay in their lane and don't try to keep up with the Joneses about what's the next sexy topic making classes, right? So yeah, you got to be pretty decent sniper to coach sniping in the military.
When we first talked, I was listening back to the episode, and you talked about, again, semantics about rescue being an action of opportunity. And that's the way it's usually spoken about, where it is actually the objective. And you clarified to say the people that created those acronyms, and that was their intent, that it was the objective, but words matter, and we just need to be careful about how we identify things. Are you happy now to see, because over the last couple years, search is really taking a foothold and becoming on the forefront of us realizing that that's our objective? Are you happy to see that push happening?
I am. I think that there is a counter swing, though. There's people out there that are saying, listen, if you're on an engine and you show up to a house and you see the opportunity to rescue, put the hose down and go rescue. I think that that's easy to say when the house isn't in front of you. But as a basic strategy, I have the tool that removes all the risk for everybody. And I'm going to put that down to go get a person hanging out a window. I don't think so. I think if they're hanging out the window, they're probably, as much as you could say, create the conditions where you would throw a ladder, you can create the conditions you wouldn't. I think that there's this counter swing. I am pleased that rescue is being focused on, but extinguishing the fire rescues everybody. And we can what if it to death, but as a general policy, this just came up at my new job the other day. I was sitting and talking with a couple of crews, and like, as your operations chief, my general disposition is if you are on a hand line and you are the first hand line, your job is pretty narrow. Put the fire out. And if you can put the fire out in 1.5 minutes instead of 4, how many people did you save? I think we just have to be careful to make sure that we're not doing it all in. We'll put everything aside, because a lot of times those small activities that occur are where we get our indirect saves. Our saves that are, we're flowing water down a hallway and a civilian gets out of a hallway that they wouldn't have a second before. Or we throw a ladder to the outside of the building and this person self-extricates. When we say rescue, we have to break it down. Is this an active, I'm pulling them out or isolating in space? Or is this a passive rescue or secondary rescue where we are doing something that facilitates the person self-rescuing? And that is way more probable than the latter. I think we have to just be sure that we're having intelligent conversations, not T-shirt slogans. Have articulate conversations that lay out tactical objectives.
Mm-hmm. How have you had to shift your mindset from a larger department, more resources, to the size you're at now? Has anything changed?
The building demographics are different. The response times are different. But despite popular myth, 70% of the fires are fought in 14 to 1,800 single-foot family dwellings. 2 beds on a 1-story, 3 on a 2, 1 line, 1 and 2 rooms. That's the vast majority of structural firefighting every year. And that hasn't changed. I actually like the fact that a really good working fire here will all hands, 4 stations. That's cool because it's hyper-focused and everybody gets the reps when the reps show up. So I think that's good. Socially, it's different. Nobody's like, you can't go hide. You can't if something shitty happens, you're gonna have to talk about it because you're gonna see the person. And there's a lot less petty politics, interpersonal politics. It's easier socially because I think where I operate the best is when I can show up, shake hands, have a cup of coffee, and sit down and chat it out. That's where I'm at now. The email gets used, and they call this thing the Teams meetings. The Teams meetings gets used, but at the end of the day, this fire department advertises for a blue collar working chief that wants to get out and interface with the crews, and they knew who they were hiring. So, in many ways, this is easier because it works how I like to deal with problems. Walk into a chief's office, chief, do we have a problem? They don't even make eye contact and say no. That doesn't happen here. So it's the disadvantage is, I think if you worked your whole career here, it's a smaller place, which means it's harder to get out of the way of your former shadow, but that doesn't affect me because I'm new. So, and by the time all that kind of stuff backs up, I don't have 25 years left. So that's been pretty easy and really suits me. So I've really enjoyed it. But other than that, house fires are house fires. It's just, how many people do you have to fight the house fires, and the scale and scope of the people, which is pretty universal too.
It's easier to be present in the moment when you can be present for more moments, I suppose, when you're actually able to encounter and be with people.
That's a fantastic way to say that. That's exactly what it is. That's spot on. Yeah, that's great, Scott. You can be in the moment because you're right there, and you can just like, hey, I'll be over in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And you get over there and like, all right, let's get a cup of coffee, sit down, let's talk it through. Well, I think we're going to disagree on this one, but this is what we're going to do and why. Make sense? Yeah, it makes sense. All right. Or, boy, that's a great idea. I think we'll try that. And because it's a smaller agency, it's a little more nimble. Like they can try things without, and that's something that is really important. And Seattle could do it too. They just don't have a tradition of research and development. It's the great idea on the whiteboard that then goes out to the troops. Instead of let's run this play 100 times before we put it as a play. So research and development is easier here.
On that note, I want to definitely point out, anytime I've seen you talk to a group or share information, you and your cadre, it is obvious that you guys are in the present moment. Like it honestly feels like this is the only thing that's happening. This is important. You're important. It feels deliberate. That also spills over to any personal conversations I've ever had with you, either to an aside or something like this. So I think I'm grateful for it. I know a lot of people are grateful for it. So I just want to point it out that it's not something that goes unnoticed, and it's really appreciated.
Oh, I appreciate that. That's nice to say. And with that, like, I've done a lot of these, and your questions have always been, I mean, this is the second one, and I think some of the questions at first I might not have been as articulate with, but as we've gone on, I again, it comes back to, you put thought into these, and more thought than most. And it shows of the other, I haven't listened to your whole catalog, but I've listened to quite a few of them. And I think it shows in the questions. And it's why I was like, hey, if you ever want to do it again, I'll do it again, especially as it's been a few years. So yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, it is always about trust, right? And trust comes from people looking in the eyes and saying what they mean and giving some thought to what they're saying. So I appreciate the general tone of the interviews.
No, I appreciate that perspective on it. It means a lot.
You're one of the best at it. There's no question. You got a good handle on this, and your preparation is obvious.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I appreciate you taking the time today.
Yeah, as always, Scott. It was great seeing you the other day. You had to leave.
I only came day 2, and I had to leave at the end of the day to get home. I had a long drive, so.
Yeah, well, we're going to be up in that area again next year. The airport is going to host us.
we're back in Moncton again next year. And I think there's another 1 or 2 in Ontario.
Okay.
So, and then we're going to be in Alberta again. I don't know about Saskatchewan or Manitoba, but we'll be in BC again. And then, maybe Halifax or Nova Scotia.
Nice. I'll catch you again soon, and I'll flip you that video with the skateboard boat.
Yes, do me that for sure. I would have really appreciated that. That is really cool.
Okay, man.
That's a lot of skateboards for a boat, dude. That's a lot of cutting.
It is. He talks about how long it takes him a week to make a strip. Yeah. It's a process. You'll appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, man. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Talk to you soon, Scott.